Hello guys and welcome to the Vintage Le Mans Prototype series in the featured multiplayer for Forza Motorsport. This time we are in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and here is the grid for this multiplayer race. So the guy in front qualified 2 seconds faster than me, so that's probably the guy I should be worrying about, even though I'm sure I'll have more pace in the pocket throughout the race. I just didn't have much time to qualify. Here I'm going to modulate the throttle on the start of the race and get a very good start, much faster start than the guy in P1. And because our cars are from different years and have different characteristics, this also helps me get into the first place. Now I'm pretty much under pressure by the guys in P2 and P3. I even got a little bit of contact. And in this point of the race I'm still figuring out a little bit of the track and the car, because I haven't driven here in quite a while. The car sometimes is a little bit wonky or wobbly, not very stable, because it's an older car of course. And as I go for this really big braking zone, I'm trying to get the feel for the point of locking up on the tires as well. As you guys can see, I'm on a desk setup with the direct drive, which is pretty crazy. I just don't have my cockpit with me right now, and so I have this temporary setup. Here I overcorrected a little bit too much on the oversteer, and because of that I went into the grass, losing 2 positions. Then another shunt, I just hit the wall a little bit. Even though I don't think the damage is on, I do get some visual damage on the car and especially on the windshield. Now at this point in the race I'm thinking, what can I do to close the gap, and at the same time will I be able to achieve a better place than 3rd position. So one of the guys in front has a hefty penalty of half a second. And because of that I'm a bit hopeful that if I get close enough I might not even need to overtake him. As long as I'm less than half a second behind him, I'll be able to snatch the 1st position when the penalty is applied to him. At the same time I can see that P1 and P2 are fighting very heavily with each other, and this is very good for me, because then they will be wasting a little bit of time with their lines and with their battle. This gives me the perfect opportunity to just figure out the track and close the gap while trying to drive a little bit more carefully. Here I locked up a little bit. I have to confess that for me the desk setup it's a bit more difficult to make it work than before, because I got used to the cockpit, and at the same time it's the braking. Especially I had to reduce the braking force a lot, and so modulating the brake became very hard. Also, I'm moving a little bit on the chair while driving, so there are always new variables and new factors in the driving position now that weren't there before. So it's harder to be consistent, and especially consistent between the sessions that I do. This is almost like a farewell to this series. I really enjoyed it, and I leveled this car to level 50 doing these multiplayer races, but the series is about to end. It has been quite a lot of fun to do these vintage races. Here I can see that the guy in P2 is falling behind, so I'm only hopeful of getting at least P2, but I don't think I'll be able to get P1 unless something crazy happens or the guys just crash or something. Because the guy in P1, even though he has the 6/10 penalty, he is just pulling away from us. Another thing to worry about is the pit stops, because with these cars we have stock tires on the cars, and the stock tires on these vintage cars, they don't last very long, so the tire wear is pretty big and the tires don't have that much grip, and when they start falling off, they really fall off. With the first level, which is the small tire wear, it's not too bad, but it's definitely noticeable. But after that, when you get moderate tire wear, the grip just falls off pretty badly, and on severe tire wear, the car becomes almost undrivable, or you just have to tiptoe around everything, brake a lot. Just be very, very gentle with the tires when they are wearing out. Whoa, and the guy in P2 just had a big shunt. He recovered quite well. It was a surprise that he's still just 1 second behind me, but a nice catch, and I just got into position too, so things are starting to look good. Now my fight is really with the guy in P1. That's the guy that seems to have the better pace and consistency, but I'm now catching up to him a little bit, and the gap is becoming smaller again. Let's see. I'm noticing that with this car on this track I need to be very, very smooth, and because the car sometimes is a bit wonky or wobbly due to the vintage suspension, I actually need to be very gentle with the inputs to the point where the car wants to stay stable, and I am able to brake very heavily without unsettling the car. I think that I'm about to pit this lap. I think the guy in front will pit this lap as well, because the tires are starting to fall off, and we don't want to get mixed up with the guys from the pack behind, so if we pit now, we'll have fresher tires in the end, and at the same time we'll be racing without anyone around us. I do miss the different tire compounds on these kinds of races. Sometimes having lots of different drivers with lots of different tire compounds brings another level of interest to the race, because you see lots of different strategies. Here the one pit stop seems to be the optimal strategy. I've seen people try to do 2 pit stops, but it's not really worth it. Your tires will only be that for 1 lap. You do lose a bunch of time in that lap, but you don't lose more time than on a second pit stop. And the pit stop time is just so long that it doesn't make any sense. The races are quite short, so I think that the guy that was in P1 that was supposed to be in front of me just disconnected. It just disappeared, which is a shame, because I was hoping to have a very nice battle with him. Now for the rest of the race I might just speed up some footage and maybe leave the fastest lap of the race here, but other than that I think the race is already kinda like over. I just need to maintain the pace. The guy that's right now in P1, he hasn't done his pit stop yet. He's probably going to do his pit stop on the next lap, and then on the last lap his tires will be way fresher than mine, and I'll need to manage the gap from him. So hopefully I'll try to pull a gap from him, and on the last lap I'll be bleeding a little bit of time because my tires are worn out, but that will be okay, because luckily if I do everything right I'll just be managing the gap and he will be trying to close the gap, but if I'm far away enough he won't be able to reach me. And yeah, the guy just went into the pits, and now I'm curious to see where he is going to be when he leaves the pits. So he left the pits around 7 seconds behind me. Maybe by the end of the lap I'll be able to have this gap closer to 8 seconds, and that would be perfect if I keep piling on just a few tenths here and there. I'll need to be careful with the consistency of my laps, and especially with the smoothness on my last 2 laps, because those laps need to be very crisp and clear. Cases of qualifying laps with really worn tires. Very smooth and flawless laps without any mistakes. Here it's a bit easy to slide the car a little bit too much sometimes. If you push the car just a little bit too much on these stock tires, you just end up getting far from the ideal line and just wasting and losing time. At the same time, you want to lean into the car and try to push it to its limit of grip and try to extract the most speed and pace out of it, and it's a nice challenge. I guess the 1:25.7 was just my fastest lap. I was pushing a little bit harder than what I usually do here, risking a little bit, but at the same time I need to think about saving the tires. It's hard for me to get a feel for the tire management in Forza Motorsport. In other games or racing games or simulators like in Assetto Corsa, I can definitely feel that the way I drive can have a huge impact on the tire life, especially with the flat spots and when you lock up the tires, of course, but also how much you slide the car around and how much you are actually pushing the car into oversteer or understeer. It will start showing up on the tire wear, either on the rear tires on oversteer or the front tires in understeer, especially when you can hear the car skid across the track. Here I try to use the audio and listen to the tires to have an idea if I'm damaging the tires too much, but it's pretty hard for me to figure out if I'm actually saving tire when I'm driving in a less aggressive fashion. Here I go for the last lap and my tires are already starting to show some minor to moderate wear. Now this is going to be probably the trickiest and most difficult lap of this race for me, because the tires, they don't really want to turn too much. They also don't brake as well. When I'm braking it's easier to lock up. It's harder to turn and trail brake at the same time because I just have a lot less grip available. And this is one of the interesting things, especially in multiplayer in Forza for me, is that the way the tire wear happens is very noticeable and you actually need to change the driving, and the tire wear has a strong impact on the race results, so the pace actually drops off quite a bit. And because the tires are so worn now, I need to be really careful, and I'm tiptoeing around the track. As you guys can see, my acceleration point out of that corner was way later than usual. Here I'm also lifting way more, trying to brake very gently, even braking with the gearbox as well, trying to just keep everything under control. It's pretty easy to slide out when you have the tires this worn out. Here, as you can see, I'm modulating a lot more the accelerator, and even then the car doesn't really want to turn. I was surprised that I was able to still pull the gap on the guy that just pitted 1 lap later than me, because he should have had the better tires at the end of the race. His tires should not be very worn out. I did the fastest lap of the race, but there was a guy in the Ferrari 512S that was also doing laps in the 27s, so this guy was pretty quick. It was a shame that we didn't race against each other. It was a little bit sad that the other guy in P1 got disconnected or just disappeared from the race, otherwise it could have been a very nice and intense battle. As always, I hope you have enjoyed the video and are liking this Forza series. Thank you for leaving your comments and likes on the video and subscribing to my channel. Have a great day and see you on the racetrack.